Welcome to the James Chambers Show, week of curated content. This is episode 1. Welcome to the James Chambers Show. I'm your host for this podcast, James Chambers, and again across the aisle from me here is Kate. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
It's always good to have you back. And we've been on a little hiatus for a few weeks. I was out of the state actually for about a week and a half doing a wedding for family, and that was a lot of fun. Kind of a whirlwind tour of Norman, Oklahoma. So go Norman.
Place.
Yeah. Woohoo, Norman, Oklahoma. So, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. It was fun. Nice to see family. In the interim, we're having a nice, huge wood fence built on our property, which is kind of nice for the dogs. They can have a nice big backyard to go run around in. So that's kind of cool. So I've been hearing sawing and banging and construction noises for the last few days. So
I'm sure that's thrilling.
It makes life interesting. And then on top of that, we went silent for about a week just to regroup. I'm playing with a new piece of technology in the studio called the ART Pro Channel 2 for any of you gearheads out there who are interested in that kind of thing. So I'm working on dialing in it's a compressor, equalizer, limiter. And so I'm dialing in all the parameters for that. So you might feel a little bit of pumping and breathing. Haha, technical term. Some of you may or may not know it. Don't bother looking it up. It's not important. But so you might hear a few little things with the compressor going on during the next show or two, just while I figure that out. Kate, what's going on in your world?
Well, it is the closing in on the deadline for the personal tax season with the extensions.
God, yes,
and so numbers, they're just swimming.
Lots of numbers.
Yes.
Gotcha. So as we know, Brett Kavanaugh was sworn in as an associate justice to the Supreme Court, and he is now sitting in one of the highest seats in the country. And this comes after an incredibly contentious confirmation process and vetting process, to what extent there actually was a vetting process. And people are really, really still pissed about this. The waves have not calmed down over the last 2 weeks. You still see things flying all over Twitter and Facebook and probably Instagram, even though I don't use my account. I have to wonder to what extent the Kavanaugh confirmation will actually play a part in the midterms, because the midterms are less than 30 days away. We are coming really close to a major election. And so barring, of course, a presidential election, this one is huge with the potential to flip the House into Democratic hands, a slim but still possible chance to flip the Senate into Democrat hands. Is the Kavanaugh confirmation going to affect any of that? I guess is the fundamental question.
I really hope so. I'm so angry about this whole process and the sham of an investigation, all credible, quote unquote, allegations. Well, you don't necessarily deem any of them credible. In fact, none of them that I heard, So what kind of investigation was that? Especially when you see an op-ed saying, I went to school with him. I hung out with him. I tried to talk to them.
Right.
They would not talk to me.
And I read that op-ed too, and I thought that was interesting that it was so clear in saying that, there were like 40 witnesses or people who had information who attempted to contact the FBI and never heard back.
Right. I kind of metaphorically want to burn Susan Collins's house down.
I don't blame you. I understand. Not to go into the liberal mob thing that's happening right now. We're not talking literally.
No,
No,
obviously metaphorically, but I actually had a lot of respect for Collins before all of this. I mean, she has truly, like McCain, she has truly appeared to be one of the more moderate Republicans and truly wanted the best for her constituents. She listened to them and she voted accordingly. And to see this happen and the excuses that she made in her 45-minute speech, where the first half hour was equivocation and excuses, I'm sure he won't do this, and I don't believe he'll change Roe v. Wade. And okay, you tell yourself what you have to,
right,
so that you get reelected in 2 years. And then, there was the whole, I'm kind of going off on a rant.
It's okay.
There was the whole crowdfunding thing for, we're starting a fund. If she votes this way, we are starting this fund to fund who will run against her in 2020. They had the Justice Department review that to see if that was considered an act of bribery.
Right.
Of course it wasn't.
No, it's not. But I thought that was a very interesting reaction from the public, saying, if you vote a way that we don't like in this particular case, we're going to vote you. We're not only going to vote you out, we're going to
fund your opponent.
Yeah, we're going to
make sure you're gone.
Yeah. That's
kind of where I was at. I was like, you know what? I can't vote against her because I don't live in Maine. Unfortunately, I would maybe even consider moving up there for the opportunity. I'm more than willing to fund her opponent.
Yeah. And this is all, I think, across the board in this particular environment, it's coming down to, this sounds terrible, but we can't trust local races, one, to not be influenced by clearly dark money and outside forces. So therefore, we have to, particularly as progressives, we have to start spending our time and money on races that are not ours. They're not local. We're going to have to start supporting races that are not ours, is what I'm getting to. If we're going to regain control and start fixing the mess that we are being handed right now. And it was kind of a mess before, but it's going to be a fucking shamble by the time we get back in power, which it's going to be a minute before that happens. And the thing is with Kavanaugh, he is going to essentially help the dismantling of our structure as a country. That's what he wants. That's what his judicial precedent has been for years. So I'm really concerned about what his jurisprudence is going to be in the next 30 years before he kicks the bucket. But I mean, we're just going to have to wait and find out. I think the bigger impact, and I agree with you, or I should say I agree with you that I hope that this becomes a voting factor in the midterms. But I don't know if it's going to be a big enough talking point, because I don't think people really understand the difference between what he went through and what and Professor Ford went through, which was not a criminal investigation. It was not a courtroom setting. This was a job interview. Mm-hmm. And I don't care what job you're applying for. If you're interviewing,
get up there and call half of your bosses partisan hacks and, okay.
Yeah, you're having a peer interview and the first thing you say is essentially, I think this whole interview process has been, rigged from the start, and I think this was all funded by your competitors.
Don't forget Hillary.
Oh, well, and the Clintons.
I don't know how he managed to bring the 2016 election into it, but he did.
Well, I think he was even going back so far as to the Ken Starr investigation from Bill Clinton.
Right.
Because he was involved in that too. So he's
it's all part
revenge.
Of that liberal agenda. Yeah. No, I'm telling you. If a woman had done that,
she would have been run out on a rail.
The narrative would be completely different. And you know what? To that point, and I don't know if you've seen this. I've actually meant to send it to you. But I saw this Twitter thread that this author had written.
I think I know where you're going.
The analogy to being kicked in the nuts.
Mm-hmm. I read that today, actually.
It was fucking brilliant. And I was like, you know what? And I'm sorry to, pigeonhole you here, but most men will not be able to extend themselves to the metaphor for as long because they come to a point where that just wouldn't happen. Well, you know why it wouldn't? Because you have that privilege. You can't imagine where you wouldn't have that privilege.
Right.
So there is a point where they're like, okay, I can see this. I can see this. But then they're like, no, that would never happen to me. Well, no, it wouldn't. And that's what he's trying to say.
Right. Well, and let's back up and clarify for people who haven't read this Twitter thread, because it's kind of extensive and we're not going to go through all of it. But it was an analogy essentially saying that how would it feel to you if, as a man, if it was, I think he framed it as like your mother's coworker, or
yes, you're like 8 or 10 years old, and your mother's coworker kicked you in the nuts,
as hard as she can,
and then
a couple of times,
and then she kicks you again and again,
mm-hmm.
and you tell your mom, and she blows you off, and they don't want to ruin her reputation or her future or this, mm-hmm. and then you go around with, and it was very, very well written.
It was, but it extends to, men now being taught in this analogy that they need to protect themselves from being kicked in the nuts because women just want to kick men in the nuts, and that's just what
your body
was made to do. And so and your body is made to be nut kicked, so you need to protect it. And so you start changing your clothing habits, and you start changing your protective habits, and you start questioning the people that you get involved with because you have to be worried that they might actually hurt you in that way. And it's a very strongly composed analogy to sexual assault victims as women primarily, and it was really, really impactful. And I think it requires for men to understand this
is to have some nuts
that haven't been exploded. Yeah, well, that's a tiny piece of empathy. Just a tiny shred of empathy to be able to look at somebody else's perspective, particularly a female perspective, and say, wow, if that were me, or if that were the case, if you can't seem to, understand that this is a problem, but if you can at least say, well, if that were the case, how would I feel? If I, as an adult who's been traumatized for years, how would I react to this? Like, that's all it requires to understand where people are coming from. It's just that tiny little shred of empathy. And there's so many people who just refuse to even
extend
engage.
That.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to extend a little bit of fucking consideration to another human being, especially, in this case, with a different gender. Yeah, that was, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking about actually bringing that up today, and I thought, well, maybe the next show. But I'm glad you did, because it is very important. So, I think the whole Kavanaugh thing at this point, the only impact is, well, clearly going to be from the jurisprudence standpoint. But the bigger issue is going to be if women, particularly, and the men who support them, actually do go to the polls and who actually do try to demand some sort of recompense for this situation. I don't know if that'll happen. I think people are so just confounded by the news cycle that, it's gone again. This whole hearing and the impact is gone again for the most part.
I agree with you, and I disagree in a lot of ways. I agree with you that the news cycle is so fast, and it's almost impossible to keep up with what the latest scandal is.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think people are forgetting that there is a great deal of them, and the pile of shit is getting high.
Yes.
You need your waiters now, okay? This isn't a step around the piles. This is the shit's getting deep in here, people. And I think there are enough angry people right now because of all of the different things.
Right.
That I think there's a good chance. Now, if that's enough to motivate them to actually make it to the poll or figure out where they're supposed to be, and hopefully their polls aren't closed, you know?
Right, yeah.
But
or you haven't been taken off the voter rolls.
Right, but different topic. Okay, the only thing that really gives me hope about the whole Kavanaugh thing is, one, Chief Justice Roberts ordered the investigation from the Justice Department into him, I don't know how extensive, but it's an independent investigation with different directives, and so hopefully more things will be considered, because I don't know how you could possibly say that there is absolutely no credibility to this story when the calendar he wrote himself and for whatever reason preserved for 35 years.
Right. That's a
little weird.
That is really strange.
But it indicates that it's entirely possible.
Yeah. That one fact alone does indicate that it's possible.
I have to wonder what were the directives in this order for this investigation? What did they consider credible? Because they never once gave her any credibility, no matter what her story was.
Right.
Like, she could have been, it was this exact time at this address, and this person drove me, it was this many clicks. You know, I mean, like, and it wouldn't be good enough. Oh, it had to have been someone else.
Well, and also we should remember that this FBI investigation was not even a week. It was 3 days. And they did say that if they had full reign, typically they could wrap up an investigation like this in less than a week. So the time frame, I mean, I think people can kind of quibble about the time, that it was a relatively short investigation. Yeah, it was, but they can actually do this type of investigation quickly if they want to. And again, this is not a criminal investigation, which means that it would be in the hands of the Justice Department specifically.
Well, and they actually get to choose what part of it is released, which is another major concern to me.
Right. But that's what the FBI specifically, in this case, what the FBI, what it's doing is a background investigation, which falls under the purview of the executive office, which means that the Trump administration very specifically gets to set the parameters of the investigation. And they gave them a list originally of 11 people I think it was 11 people that they could potentially review. And then they said, well, no, you can do whatever you want. It's okay. But I'm not convinced that was ever actually codified. I mean, the Trump investigation,
especially with the time frame upon it. I mean, yes, you have however many agents that you can devote to this on but
sure.
Still,
but for God's sake, they didn't
interview 40 people
who wanted
came
to,
and said, "Hey, I have relevant information one way or the other."
If even 10% of those people had relevant information, we should know about it.
Yeah.
And they should have investigated, or I should say interviewed, Dr. Ford and Mr. Kavanaugh. And they didn't. Though
but the testimony in front of the Senate was enough. Where it's
fucking ridiculous that's enough. You know what I'm saying? That boggles
I do
my
know
mind.
what you're saying, because to me, the fact that man got up there and had a freaking temper tantrum because he's been wrongly accused. No, you know what? You haven't credibly proved to me that she is absolutely full of shit.
Yes, and she was eminently credible. And the fact that she was credible and he lacked even, and I can understand, you can be upset, you can be a little angry, you can get a little weepy. I totally get you are
showing
in a very
emotion
hard
isn't
spot.
Wrong.
It's not wrong at all.
It's the word you choose and the way in which you deliver them.
It was the partisan hackery that just flowed out of his mouth that immediately disqualified him from the seat. As far as I'm concerned, as a job interview, that was it. You're done. Despite everything else, whatever anybody thinks, that should have been it. But it wasn't.
And you know what? Actually, polls have shown that the majority of Americans agree with that. Because, I mean, occasionally the majority of Americans give me hope because I think, oh my God, they're reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes.
Well, right now we're being run by a 30% margin of the country. Like 30% of the people in America are running all of us, essentially, in terms of policy.
Right. And there are a lot of people that say, with the whole believe women or believe victims, a lot of people are saying, well, if you do that, you're automatically subverting the innocent until proven guilty. No, you're not. You are believing that something happened to them. If that person checks out and they wrongly accused them, depending on whatever the circumstances were, that doesn't mean nothing happened to them. It means that somehow, some way, this wire was crossed. Yeah. And I'm not I automatically believe somebody, having been a victim of assault, I automatically believe somebody when they tell me, this really fucked up thing just happened. You know what? I absolutely believe that happened to you. Whether you name names or not, I believe it happens to you. Now, if you're going to put a name on it and they can irrefutably, not irrevocably,
right.
Sorry, that was a tax thing. If you can't irrefutably prove that, there's no possible way, I'm going to believe them. Oh, there's a possible way that this could have happened. You don't forever ruin this person with a complete, thorough investigation.
Right. And that's the other thing is, wouldn't you want the most thorough investigation to be done if you were innocent?
I would want my name unquestionably clean.
Absolutely. I would say, you know what? This has been really hard on my family. This has been really hard on me. but I am willing to submit. I'm willing to submit to a full-fledged investigation because I know that I did not do this, and my family will come out clean. We are, we will turn our lives upside down to prove it. And you know what? Because everybody's got skeletons. Everybody's got stupid things.
And they're Catholic.
Yeah. And they're,
sorry.
I think we're going to have to like a friggin' Catholic section in every episode.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's relative to nothing, but I mean, except for,
apropos nothing. The Catholics.
Well, except for the sexual assault aspect.
Right.
But.
Pshaw.
I mean.
And this is a stupid thing. It's so not important, and it is so important at the same time. The small things. Why lie about small, insignificant things like what boofing means? Like, dude, you don't have to lie about that. Like, if you're of an age, which I guess we are, we know what that fucking means, but I didn't know what
boofing meant. I knew what the other one meant. I can't remember what the other one was right now.
Devil's Triangle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But again, that's not a drinking game.
Right.
And that cracks me up that, like, why lie about these things, Right. Like, you know what? Hold on. We're going to do something I don't normally like to do. I'm just going to jump into, we're going to do this live. Why not?
I love live. It's how I do my best work.
I just searched for define boofing, Urban Dictionary and Forbes, because I thought we might have some, opposite ends of the intellectual spectrum represented here. And both Forbes and Urban Dictionary both define boofing essentially as either inserting alcohol or illicit drugs, preferably psychoactive active drugs, in your rectum. So boofing is essentially beer bonging your ass or stuffing drugs up there.
I hope everyone had their own tube.
Well, you're at a concert, you just kind of go with the flow, man, especially on beach week.
I guess so. I'm obviously not East Coast enough.
I guess not. I didn't go to
any coast enough.
Right. I didn't go to Georgetown Prep, so I don't know these things.
Okay.
So, but again, the small thing of just lying about what that is, you could have just said, well, it's actually kind of gross. It's a little embarrassing. It's a slang term for this kind of behavior. Is it gross? Is it kind of stupid? Sure. But, we're 17 years old. We all say gross and stupid things. It's not farting.
You know what? I would actually like to just make the observation that, they're perfectly fine with somebody sticking something up their ass if it's themselves.
Right.
So, you cross the line into impropriety when it's somebody else putting something or somebody putting their something in your homophobic, homoerotic. And it is both.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
Homophobic, homoerotic homophobia. I don't know. However we're going to label this, it's a trend now. We're starting it.
We'll do it. We're doing it. So,
but no, that's exactly what it is. It is acting out a fantasy. Why else would you poke drugs or a
fucking beer bong
basting tube, basically a squeegee one that you can like. That's how I pictured this anal bong. Oh my god! I just imagined a new thing. Oh my god!
Well, I just pictured like one of those old cartoon like insecticide pumps where it's got the little the little
can at the bottom
thing,
and you just pump it, kind of like a bike tire,
like a tire pump,
except with the can at the bottom.
It's beer, right? It's Pabst,
probably Pabst.
Because I like beer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is
or PBR. Oh, that is all Pabst. Oh my god! Sorry,
I need to.
I'm not a beer drinker. So my ignorance is.
It's okay.
It's genuine.
It's okay. So, not everybody likes beer. I mean, unless you're Squee or PJ or any of the other guys who happen to be hanging out with old Bart O'Kavanaugh. I think Brett Kavanaugh is done for a while. I mean, until he rules on a case that is going to be, a 5-4 type case, then we'll have to come back and revisit him and that's going to happen in relative short term. So,
well, okay, I know you just said we're ending this, but this is my tag on this. I really kind of hope that the scrutiny that has been applied, particularly after, Susan Collins, you traitor. But, I mean, from her things, she believes he will not repeal not repeal, but you know what I mean, overturn Roe v. Wade and all of this. She had all these high, wonderful hopes for him, which I think is just lovely, but his precedents do not bode well for that outcome.
Mm-mm. Thank you for listening to the James Chambers Show week of curated episodes. Please be watching for the next episode coming to a podcast near you.